Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome to the messengers in our home. Hello, dear friends of Kardec Radio, and welcome back to the messengers in our home. Tonight we're going to talk about chapter 28, Social Life. Hello, Mackenzie.
Hi, Francisca. Hello, dear friends. Welcome back to another chapter of the messengers in our home.
So in preparation for our study, we would like to invite you for our opening prayer. Let's all elevate our thoughts to the higher spheres, taking a moment to connect ourselves to God, our Creator. Dear Mother, Father God, with our hearts full of gratitude, we are here united in your name, wishing to learn more about your teachings and to feel your loving presence and justice in our daily life. We are grateful for this opportunity of delving deeper into the world of the Spirit, the much we can learn from what happens after we die, how we evolve, how we work, how we communicate, and even today, as the chapter suggests, how to socialize. And so, we would like to welcome the Spirit, reminding ourselves that they're always around whenever we reach out in form of prayer, thought, and that this interchange or exchange between spiritual and the physical realm is continuous. And it's up to us for it to be on a more conscious or on a more subconscious level. So we ask you, dear Good Spirit, for your inspiration to absorb tonight's message in the best possible way, and for courage and strength to put it into practice in our daily life, so that the word becomes alive in our heart and it changes us for the better. And with your permission, we would like to start our meeting. So be it. Let us now listen to the reading of chapter 28. Enjoy.
Chapter 28, Social Life. In awe, I contemplated the sublime sight of the firmament above the aid station. The sapphire moonlight enveloped everything. The sky was like an endless, very clear blue blanket dotted with sparkling stars. The afternoon clouds had disappeared. Also contemplating the beauty of the night, Alfredo remarked, "Fortunately, the magnetic phenomena have moved out of the area. The measuring devices, however, are still registering an enormous conflict of lower energies." I was about to comment on the beauty of the sky in light of the administrator's remark when the doorbell rang softly. There were visitors at the door. Alfredo and Ismalia were both smiling. "Friends from Campo da Paz have come for a visit," Alfredo affirmed. and inviting us to the reception room in the foremost bulwark, he jovially added, "We enjoy a social life here too, and why not? You have to know how to live." Delighted with this happy note, I followed the owners of the place. I was speechless when I saw a beautiful carriage drawn by two magnificent white horses. It was an interesting, comfortable-looking vehicle, almost identical to the old public carriages from the times of Louis XV that I had seen more than once in old publications. A small family from the next colony, which, according to Aniceto, was approximately 9 miles from the station, had arrived in it. Alfredo introduced us all in gentlemanly fashion, except for Aniceto, who was an old friend of the arrivals. The visitors were the Basselars and their 2 young daughters. The head of the group was an elderly man, but in excellent shape. The woman also gave an impression of maturity, but displayed the same wonderful vivacity as the 2 girls. There was a feeling of great happiness. I didn't observe a single note of undignified conventionalism as I might have on earth. Their gestures, their simplicity, their ease and affectionate words revealed pure sincerity. We were in a social scene inaccessible to falsehood. As we all went back inside amongst great displays of family joy, I was told that the recent arrivals had been friends for a long time and had come to visit Ismalia, who seemed very happy. She had sent invitations to some of the station families, and in a few minutes the castle was receiving crowds of people to take part in the grandeur of the select gathering. I felt quite insignificant in the company of these new friends, so I confined myself to simply listening and observing. Soon after the first moments of their private conversation, I heard Aniceto ask Mr. Basselar, "How's work going?" The kindly old man answered with a broad smile, "Well, always well. We just can't place too much attention on our fellow incarnate spirits." And he added affably, "It's essential to learn how to serve and move on." Aniceto also smiled and remarked, I know. Human progress certainly isn't a question of mere days. Let's not kid ourselves." And perceiving that Vicente and I might profit from the conversation, Aniceto pointed to Alfredo's new guest, explaining, "Our friend, Mr. Basselar, is head of the teams that provide assistance to our brothers and sisters in the physical realm. He has long-standing experience with humans and knows them like no one else. You can learn a lot from what he says." "Not a lot, my dear friend," exclaimed Mr. Basselar good-humoredly. "Not a lot. I am merely a fellow spirit, fulfilling my duties with the help of divine mercy. I can't do a lot because of my natural deficiencies." "We are sure that what you have to say will be very beneficial," refuted Vicente, who had been quiet until then. "Anything you can tell us on the subject of assistance will be an invaluable learning experience for us," I said. Our new friend looked at us knowingly and asked, "Did you used to be doctors?" "Yes," we replied at the same time. Mr. Basselar thought for a few moments and stated, "I've always liked talking with my friends by referring to the symbols suggested by their profession. But regarding the activities I myself am involved in, I'm afraid I wouldn't have much to say to 2 practicing doctors." "On the contrary," I insisted, "your explanations would enrich our learning experience." Mr. Basselar smiled optimistically and stated, "Don't be so sure. Remember what normal patients are like. Very rarely do they practice preventive medicine. They almost invariably wait for the materialization of illness before seeking medical help. They need anesthetics when they go under the knife. They drop their regimen at the first sign of improvement. They hate the pain that reestablishes their equilibrium. They dislike to be prescribed purgatives. They prefer medications that taste good. And above all, they always think they know more than their doctor. This summarizes the way sick incarnate spirits receive and react to treatment while on earth. In our area, however, the aggravating circumstances are more substantial because we are unable to work on the soul in the same way a surgeon operates on the patient's tonsils. We are forced to prepare a suitable mental field in order to sow new thoughts, and then watch for their germination, help the tiny sprouts, and wait for time to do its work. Our struggle is not simple because, although the doctor on the earth always has loving relatives ready to cooperate on behalf of the patient, we ourselves encounter enormous legions of elements opposed to our restoring and curative activities. In general, doctors offer help to whomever wishes to receive it, at least in situations of grave danger. We, however, often have to offer assistance to those who do not want it, because they are living behind veils of profound ignorance. You're right about that, I replied, hearing such logical comparisons. Nonetheless, it's comforting to know that there are many fellow incarnate spirits in the world ready to take part in this task. Mr. Bassler had a meaningful expression on his face and said, "Not always. Cooperation is another problem. The majority of brothers and sisters who offer themselves for service leave the spirit world with promises to fulfill, but they prefer to live a life of ease. Few depart from this common pattern. We rarely find incarnates who are willing enough to love work for work's sake without expecting some kind of reward. Most are looking for instant gratification. In such a condition, they don't realize that their minds have become dark dwellings overcrowded with useless elements. As a result of their corrupted reasoning, their sight also becomes confused. They see violent storms instead of a heavenly landscape, and rocky mountains instead of a path leading gloriously upward. Small delusion by small delusion, they form a continent of immense fantasies. From then on, the recapitulation of their earthly experiences is more strongly inclined toward the animal desires, and when they arrive at that juncture, few return to their sacred duties to consider the grandeur of divine blessings." Mr. Bassler paused and then continued, "And making excuses? In the arena of spiritual assistance, you will someday see how many pretexts are invented by incarnates in order to escape the testimony of divine truth in tasks that are their personal responsibility. The stewards of responsibility say they have just too much to do. The servers of obedience claim a lack of opportunity. The affluent stand guard over their wealth, and the poor who have received the blessing of poverty rebel against it. The young say they are too young to cultivate sublime realities, and the elderly declare themselves useless to serve them. Married couples complain about their families, and single people complain that they don't have families. The infirm say they can't, and the healthy say they don't need to. Rarely do incarnates manage to live without contradictions." Mr. Bassler seemed willing to continue, but at Alfredo's request, the two young women came to get him and Aniceto in order to try to resolve a private problem. So tonight, as we already know, we're going to talk about a little bit about chapter 28, Social Life. We already heard the story, we already heard the reading of this chapter. We know more or less where we are, in the full picture of the book, right? Andre is at the aid station, at the Campo da Paz aid station. He is meeting new people, learning more and more so that when they arrive on Earth, they can use everything that they're learning in the tasks that they're going to perform there. He's going there with Vicente and Aniceto and probably some other people. And right now, after last week's chapter, when we met Paulo, right, who was the friend, Alfredo's friend, that caused all the problems that Alfredo and Ismalia had in their marriage. Well, when I say that Paulo caused everything, we all know what we're talking about. Is sometimes we can cause problems or troubles in other people's lives, but if somebody is causing problem and stirring trouble in my personal life, I am also responsible for allowing or not allowing the other person to really disrupt my entire incarnation, as happened with Alfredo and Ismalia. Alfredo was more distressed later on. Ismalia suffered understanding and tried to do the best that she could, and that's one of the reasons why she is way more evolved, at least at this moment, than Alfredo is, because she was able to really understand and to keep loving instead of putting hatred inside of herself. But we already talked about this in previous chapters, and right now what's going on, and by the title of this chapter, right, we know that we're gonna talk a little bit about the social life that they also have, and which is really interesting, because sometimes, right, we tend to think, or I wouldn't say that's a lot of people, but depending on how involved we are in a certain kind of charitable or work or a spiritist center, we tend to maybe sometimes not to lead or not to have a social life. And that's what the main teaching, or one of the main teachings of this chapter really is that can we have a social life? And it's natural that the answer is, of course, yes, right? But one of the main sentences here when they talk about this, and Alfredo is the one who says that, and I'm going to quote, and he says, "We enjoy a social life here too, and why not?" But I think the most important part of this quotation here, of what Alfredo says, is the last part of his sentence, when he says, "You have to know how to live," right? So a social life, everybody can have it, right? But how do we have a social life, right? What kinds of companies, what kind of talk, right? What kind of things that I'm going to do in my social life? And he's not going to go into detail in this, but it is very interesting for us to really think about this. So that I start from the beginning, because that sentence is a few paragraphs after the beginning of the chapter, is Andre is just describing how beautiful the light of the sky is at the moment, and then he talks about the moon, right? The moonlight, and that the sky is pretty, very clear, and he sees a blue blanket dotted with sparkling stars. The clouds have disappeared, and so on. And Alfredo makes a comment that magnetic phenomena, which they described a few chapters prior to this one, is over by now, at this very moment. But he's still, in the measuring devices, there still feel and measure a conflict of lower energies, and probably this is due always to the proximity that he already mentioned before this chapter to Earth and to other colonies who are dealing and treating spirits of lower vibration, which, as we already know by now as well, these mental vibrations, these negative mental vibrations, can really interfere with the whole spiritual atmosphere of the place, and being closer to places, it naturally has a deeper effect on the other colonies or the other places who are close to that lower vibration area. So Andre wanted to talk a little bit about this, but then he says that somebody knocks at the door, and then Alfredo and his mother start smiling, and Alfredo says, well, friends from Campo da Paz have come for a visit, and they invite Andre, Vicente, and everybody to come and receive those guests. And that's when Alfredo says, right, we enjoy a social life here too, and why not? Maybe this question in why not was, if we can picture the situation, right, we would probably see Andre and Vicente looking at them and say, hey, do we have a social life here? What does that mean? Don't we work all the time? Can't we? It's all these questions. And if you want to know a little bit more about this, about the social life, about gatherings and so on, as always, I would always recommend going back to No Solar. We have some chapters talking about this, talking about Andre, going to the fields of music and talking to Lysias and having some kind of fun throughout his own life. So now what happens is Andre sees this family coming close to their place, right? And he describes everything, right? He mentions the carriages, 2 horses, and a lot of people, that family inside that carriage. And we have to remember that some of these spirits, right, we're talking about 1940s, maybe a little bit, it's around 1940s, right? We already talked about the war going on, the Second World War going on. And if we think a little bit, right, if those spirits are there for a while, let's say 60 years, more or less discarnated, maybe some more time than 60 years. So that's more or less the end of the 1800s, and that's what the type of cars that they used to have, and that's basically what the types of transportation that they had for personal carriage. And that's maybe what they wanted or what they liked to use and so on. Although if we go back to No Solar, we will see how different inside the city the cars or the transportation really are, right? We talk about the Airbus and so on. So it is very interesting to see these contrasts on with people and how they feel and what they want to use or what they want to employ on their trips, and how they are moving from one place to another. It usually depends on how the spirit really wants to use and to be once they die. So it's basically what it is this description, and then they are all presented to themselves, introduced, and Alfredo talks about the bachelors, which are these people who are just coming, right? The mother, the father, and 2 young daughters. And the bachelors is the name of the family name, right, of this group of people arriving there. So there is an elderly man, and the woman is also a mature woman, but they were really displayed a wonderful vivacity, just like the 2 younger girls. And there was this feeling of great happiness, and there's something that I find really interesting on Andre's description here, because remember, we're in this social, right, gathering, and we all know how social gatherings are, right? We go to a certain place, and we know that in these social gatherings, some people like another person more than they like one person, right? So it's natural that we don't know everybody, that there are those weird feelings or those weird sensations of meeting a new person, or even meeting again, right, the same person over and over. And we have, depending on how much love or how much care we have for the other person, and unfortunately sometimes how less care I have or how less love I have for another person, those situations can become really awkward. But that's the thing that Andre really really likes to point out here is that he says, and I'm going to quote because I think it's really, really interesting that I quote this, "I didn't observe a single note of undignified conventionalism as I might have on earth. Their gestures, their simplicity, their ease, and affectionate words revealed pure sincerity. We were in a social scene inaccessible to falsehood." That's mainly what I would say, at least the first part of this chapter is about. How can we achieve this ideal, right, of when we are in a social scene, when we are in a public gathering, when we are with other people, to have this kind of love, this kind of simplicity, this kind of feel towards the ones who are at that gathering, right? We know how hard that is because we still are sometimes sympathetic to some people, less sympathetic to other people. And how can I really be more truthful without being hurtful to another person, right? So as he is saying here, how can we really transform our social gatherings in a place or in a moment where there is no falsehood? It doesn't mean that I will be hurtful to another person, right? To be so truthful that I'm going to hurt the other, right? Because sometimes we say, oh no, I only speak the truth, correct? And to say this most of the times, unfortunately, means that I don't mind and I don't care if I hurt the other person because what I'm going to say is the truth. And this is not a very good way to become friends and to really, have the ease and the proximity with other people to make that gathering a better place, right? A good place for us to be in, right? And it is something that we really need to work on so that one day we are able to do this, right? Because we have those conventionalisms, and if we try to tear apart, right, this whole paragraph here, we will see all these words that we would really need to pay attention to them, right? Undignified conventionalism. So we have these conventionalisms, right? We have all these conventions, and then we put a certain type of clothing, and we have to behave this way, and that all becomes like unnatural, or hopefully it can become natural at one point. However, if it becomes natural, but I still don't like the other person, right? It's still, something is still missing, right? So what Andre is trying to convey to us here is that hopefully we will understand one day how we have to live, right? When we are enjoying the social life, right? So if we have a conventionalism, make it be a dignifying conventionalism, right? Instead of just an undignifying conventionalism, as we have here, right? Sometimes in these social gatherings that we have. And so to become simple, to become at ease with other people, using words that are affectionate, right? Full of love, full of caring for the other person, but not in a false way, becoming and being more sincere, right? If you have something bad to say, think of something else to say. Think of something good, right? I once heard this thing, if a person comes to you and asks if you like their clothing, and if you don't like their clothing, for example, right, instead of saying that you don't like their clothing, find something in the clothes of that person that you can make a compliment, right, so that you don't transform that situation in a bad situation. So let's say a man or a woman comes to you and say, how do you like my shirt, or how do you like my skirt, right? And let's say you don't like it, but why make a terrible comment and create that situation, right? So instead of doing that, and let's say the shirt is a bright color or is a dark color, and say, oh, I love that this shirt or the skirt is black or yellow. It really matches like with what you are right now, and make a compliment. And that's a good way of starting that, right? Of, it's not everything that I can say that I need to say, right? So those small things are very, very important in these types of social gatherings, right? But then they move on, they keep walking, and they all go back inside, and then there's a lot of some other friends would come and are coming and so on. So the house or the castle, right? So a lot of people are there, and Andre is kind of, he out of place because he doesn't know anybody. He only knows that group of people that we already met, like Ismalia and the other people. So what he decides to do with Vicente is, stay around so that you can maybe pay attention to what the Aniceto is talking, and maybe they will be able to learn something. So he says that he hears Aniceto asking Mr. Bachelor about work, about what they're doing and how he is doing and so on. And Mr. Bachelor says that, well, it's well, always well. Only that we cannot, stick and be always placing too much attention on our fellow incarnate spirits. And he adds that it's essential to learn how to serve and then move on. It is interesting, and I'm going to make a comment right after what Aniceto says, because Aniceto smiles and says, I know, human progress certainly isn't a question of mere days. Let's not kid ourselves. So why are they talking like this, right? We don't know exactly what Mr. Bachelor does, but apparently by his description, he is also connected to work among the incarnates and helping them in some kind of work that they are doing. However, what he is saying is, well, we're doing whatever necessary and anything that we can do, but we cannot do everything. They have to do what they have to do, right? Everybody has their own piece of work, right? I have to, like a clock, right? Like a watch, all those small gears inside, they all need to do their part. And here is the same thing. And that's why he is saying this, we can't place too much attention on them, because we do part of what we do what we need to do, but they need to do what they need to do. And we cannot make them depend on us for everything. So they need to go on and keep working. So we need to learn how to serve and move on. Sometimes we do what we need to do. We finish our work, and then we have to pass it on, right? Leave the other person to do their part. And then once it's done, then you come back and do something more. And then the other person will go and do something else, and so on and so forth. And maybe he is saying this because we need to understand that. We really need to understand that for us to evolve and for us to keep working and keep improving, we need to actually keep doing what the work that's awaited for us, right? Or that's being asked for us, or that was asked for us, that I compromised myself sometimes and most of the times before reincarnating. So, and then that's why Aniceto says that human progress isn't a question of mere days, and that's certain. Naturally, it takes time. It takes time for me to learn how to write. It takes time for me to learn how to ride a bike. It takes time for me to learn how to understand words, how to speak, and anything that I'm going to do. And if all these things take time, why wouldn't it take time for me to improve myself spiritually and morally? right? So it's not a question of it's not in days that I'm going to change. It's a question of keep doing, persevere, right? Keep working, keep doing what you need to do. And Aniceto, when he looks at the situation and the conversation, where the conversation is going, Aniceto points to Andre and Vicente and tells Mr. Bassler, and tells Vicente and Andre, right, what Mr. Bassler does. And then that's when we finally know what Mr. Bassler is actually doing. And he says that he is the head of teams that provide assistance to brothers and sisters in a physical realm, and that it would be profitable for Vicente and Andre to learn more of what they do, since Andre and Vicente will go to Earth to probably help some of the incarnate brothers and sisters when they finally reach Earth to do what they are going there to do. And Mr. Bassler naturally, and of course, would say that, well, he doesn't know, we will not learn a lot from what he says, because he's just a worker as everybody else. And he says that he can't do a lot because of his natural deficiencies, which is really interesting for us to always think about, humility, and this is a point of being humble, right? But being humble also, and because he doesn't stop and he doesn't say, I'm not going to say anything because I really can't tell you, and then move away, and then, doesn't say anything anymore. No, he says that, but actually once they start talking, he goes and says what he does, and he tells us what he thinks is important. So that means that he recognizes that he has some worth, and that's what humbleness, and humility comes to us, right? We have to recognize that we have deficiencies, but we also need to recognize that we have a certain type of knowledge, that we can, with our knowledge, be of help to somebody else. And at the same time, the other person can be of help to me. And that's when we really start to understand that we are humble, right? It's not to put ourselves down, but also it's not to put ourselves up, regarding and referring to another person, is to really try to recognize that I still have a lot to learn, but that I know a little bit of things, and that with these things that I know, together with the things that you know, we both together can work much, much better. And that's what's interesting about this whole conversation, and that's what Vicente says. Well, we are sure that what you have to say will be very beneficial, to which Andres says, well, anything that you can tell us will, in what you work on Earth, will be really, really important for us, will be an invaluable learning experience, because naturally, and I already said that, we're going to Earth, Andre Vicente, and, if they are able to get, an advice, a suggestion from Mr. Bassler, they can use it once they have the chance to use it, right? So Mr. Bassler looks at them and asks, did you used to be doctors? And both of them said yes, and we know that Andre and Vicente were doctors before discarnating. And Mr. Bassler says, well, when I talk to my friends, I always like to use metaphors, to use symbols that my friends are more familiar with, so that they can understand what I want to say. But unfortunately, I'm afraid I wouldn't have too much to say to two practicing doctors, right? And Andres says, well, on the contrary, your explanations would enrich our learning experience. And Mr. Bassler smiles at this very moment and says, well, don't be so sure. And then comes a very interesting lesson when he says, don't be so sure that it would enrich our learning experience. And why he says don't be so sure? Because what he's going to say, which is really interesting, is that he's going to use Andres and Vicente's experience of being doctors, not to teach them something new completely new, but to remind them of what they already know. Maybe to some of us it can be new. I would doubt it, because this is such a common knowledge. When we stop to think, and the things that he's about to say, he's about to tell Andre, Vicente, and ourselves, we're going to say, well, I've seen this before. And some of them, if we hadn't thought about it, and this is the first time that you think about these, you say, how come I never thought of this? Because this is so easy, quote unquote, here to see that if we haven't seen it before, I would say, how come I never saw this, right? So he starts to use these images or these situations that happen in medicine. And since maybe you're not a doctor, I am not a doctor, but we've been to doctors, right? We've been, I don't know, hopefully nothing serious, but everybody went to doctors, right? So when we are, even if it were a long time ago when we were young, but we went to see doctors or a dentist, right? So what is interesting here is that he starts by saying, remember what normal patients are like. Who are these normal patients? Us, right? The incarnate ones, everybody. Very rarely do they practice preventive medicine. We don't think of preparing or using prevention before we get sick. So we get sick and then we seek medical help, right? And what is preventive medicine, right? Let's say your father, my father, or my mother, or somebody in my family has a certain kind of illness that's maybe transmitted through genetics, right? That can be, you have a higher chance of having the same kind of disease. So if you already know that, why don't we prevent, using more of this or less of that food, or taking some precautions so that I don't have that same kind of thing later on in life? So that's one of the questions, right? Sometimes the doctor prescribes a medicine, for example, and then once he says or she says, no, you have to take this medicine for, let's say, the next 2 weeks, this, 3 times a day, whatever, and then 2-3 days later, I start feeling better, and then I said, well, I don't need to take these medicines anymore, and then I just stop taking the medicine. Why? He will say it later, because unfortunately, and above all the other things that he just said, we, unfortunately, most of the times or sometimes always think that we know more than the doctor that studied medicine to really take care of people. And which is really interesting. Do we ever do that? It's a question for ourselves, right? It's what Mr. Bassler is trying to make us think. It's not telling us what we need to do, but he's telling us, hey, think about this. How are you behaving when it comes to these things in your life, in your physical life, right? For example, he says that most of the times we hate the pain that we establish our equilibrium. And then somebody I can almost hear somebody saying, well, but should I love the pain? So it's not about loving the pain in itself and seeking the pain, right? But why do I hate the pain? Why do I have the feeling of hatred? Doesn't it seem like at least a paradox? I want to be more loving, right? And then when I receive the pain or something is hurting myself, I hate it. So how am I seeking love and hating at the same time, right? So loving something is not wanting that something, right? I can love it, but I love it a little bit away from me, right? I can love the pain, understanding that it reestablishes what I need for my body, but I can treat it and say, hey, whenever you have the chance, please just let me be, right? Please, pain, go away. I love you, but I love you far away from me. Why should I be thinking of I hate this, and I hate that, right? So it's a little bit weird the way I'm thinking and the way I'm saying it right now. But if we, right, together think of love in this sense, we can change the words, change the feelings, and then move the way we see, or change the way we see things. So unfortunately, right, with these positions, with these the way that we think about this and the way that we act, we aggravate our lives. We aggravate the circumstances, right? And on earth, we can treat the body, right? Like then he mentions that the surgeon can come and operate, right? Patient's tonsils. He uses this expression, or can remove the appendix. But there's no way that while discarnate, we can use and work on the soul, or even incarnate. I can't do the same thing with the soul. We have to sow new ideas and make the person think differently, plant new seeds, and wait for those seeds to germinate, right? So that they can become a full tree, or whatever the plant is. One day it will sprout, and then only with time or through time those things can grow. But we need to do our part. However, it is hard, and that's why he said in the beginning, right? We can do something, but it's not for us to do everything. While incarnate, right, some people come and go to the doctor, right, and the doctor can help them if they want to receive help. However, if a person is living, and that's the expression that he uses, right? If a person is living behind veils of profound ignorance, it doesn't matter if I want to help, if I'm giving good advice. The other person will just lock himself or herself inside that veil, right? Those veils of ignorance, and then get stuck inside there. And I can only plant something and wait for it to sprout. And that work is not mine. That work is the other person's. So let's put ourselves now, instead of putting ourselves in the shoes or in the position of Mr. Bachelor, thinking of ourselves as the ones who are planting something, do we ever think of another person planting something on me? And how am I receiving those seeds? What am I doing with those seeds? Am I allowing those seeds of good thoughts, of good deeds, of good emotions to really sprout and grow inside of myself? Or am I destroying them? Or am I not even allowing myself to receive those messages? What am I doing with those? This is something that we really need to start thinking more and more about it. So hopefully we are not hiding and living behind veils of profound ignorance. So we are allowing other people to come to help, and then we are allowing ourselves to really, taking good care of those seeds that are being planted all the time in our lives. Andre then says that he is right and agrees with what he says, but he says, well, nonetheless, it's comforting to know that there are many fellow incarnate spirits in the world ready to take part in this task. And that's maybe a good and wishful thinking on Andre's part, to which Mr. Bachelor says, unfortunately, not always. Cooperation is another problem. But before going on, I would just like to remind everybody, right, that you can, at any time, go into our website, KardecRadio.com, and, leave us a message there. You can go and look at the contact page, send us an email, or you can go on Facebook and then type Kardec Radio. You'll find our page, and then you can leave a comment there. Not only about this program that you're listening to right now, The Messengers in Our Home, but to any other program that we have on our lineup, right? The program on Saturday mornings at 11 a.m., it's always live, right, with Vanessa Anceloni. Most of the time she is our host, and you can call in, you can talk to her. Or the programs on Thursday nights, right, where we have a special talk in English, or the program for kids on Mondays, or on Sundays, right? So we have a different types of programs for different types of people. So if you know that a person can learn from our program, tell other people about this program. If you think that's going to be more interesting to listen to interviews or to talks, just go KardecRadio.com. You're going to find the whole page with all the lineup, all the programs and all the times and so on. And we will be very, very happy, me and Francisca and Vanessa and all the other hosts, to receive messages from you, letting us know what you think, if we can improve, what we can do to make it better for you so that you have a better experience with us, right? So it's through and with cooperation, with your cooperation, that we can make Kardec Radio an even better place for us, for all of us, to learn more about Spiritism and also about ourselves. Talking about cooperation, right? And that's what Mr. Besseler was talking about. He says, unfortunately, not always, because cooperation is another problem. A lot of our brothers and sisters, they offer themselves for service before incarnating, right? Before being born again. They promise a lot of stuff while in the spirit world, but once they are incarnated, they prefer to live a life of ease. To which we have to once again stop and think, what is he talking about? Who are these spirits who made lots of promises before incarnating and now prefer to live a life of ease? Is he talking about me? Is he talking about you? I would say that he's talking about all of us, right? If we are here right now at this moment listening to this, talking about this, reading this book, he is probably talking about us that are listening to this at this very moment. We were the ones, or part of the ones, who decided, and before incarnating, we decided, that's what I need to do, that's what I'm going to do. Are we doing it? What are we doing with our own lives? But he goes on, he says, we rarely find incarnates who are willing enough to love work for work's sake without expecting some kind of reward. And look, when he says that it's rare to find a person that does her or his work for work's sake without expecting some kind of reward, he is not only talking about money or about power. Because if we are talking about spiritist circles, there's no money involved. Maybe there's power, but more than that, this reward that he is talking about can also be the recognition of our peers, of a person that says, hey, you did a great job, hey, you did this, and there's no complaining about, and everybody is always happy with what we do. And if we don't receive this, and because of that, I don't continue working, this was the reward that I was waiting for. So I was not working for work's sake. I was working for the reward of seeing and expecting the other people that work with me to recognize that I am doing a good job. I'm not saying that it's not good to receive. And on the other hand, if I am the one, or if I am one that I'm seeing a person working on the Spiritist Center, for example, I am the one who have to recognize the other one's work. I have to be the one who says, hey, man, that's a great job. Let's keep doing, to really help, encourage the other person to keep working. However, if a person doesn't do that to me, I am the one that need to understand that I am there to work for work's sake without expecting some kind of reward. That's what he says after that, right? Most are looking for instant gratification. So if we don't have that instant gratification, our minds become dark dwellings, places of darkness inside. And we start putting a lot of useless stuff inside there. And then it gets really hard for us to see things properly and to really keep working the way the work should be done. And then we start seeing things through different lenses because we are not satisfied anymore. So instead of seeing a heavenly landscape, we see a violent storm. Instead of seeing a glorious path or a path leading gloriously upward, we see rocky mountains that are very hard to trespass. So it's the same vista. It's the same place. It's the same landscape. But because I'm not satisfied, because I'm not being instantly gratified, I start to see things differently. I start to see things in a darker tone instead of in a lighter tone or in a more vibrant tone, right? And then small delusion by small delusion, right? Small step by small step, then I create this whole different idea of what's going on, and then I usually give up because I'm not doing the work that I need to do simply for work's sake, but because I was expecting something. And when this starts to happen, some people usually, hopefully it's not you, hopefully it's not me at all times, but sometimes instead of moving upwards to become more spiritualized, more morally evolved, I start to go down the path of animality, right? Of going closer to becoming more animal-like than more angel-like, because those are the desires of what the flesh wants, right? With what matter wants, not what morally I need to do to become a better person. Mr. Batchelor then comes and says, he pauses, right, for a while, and he says, well, and what about making excuses? Because, unfortunately, that's what happens sometimes. And on my view, that's what happens most of the times, right? We all have justifications for doing or not doing something. We all have, always. And that's what he's going to talk about. And that's how he's going to end our chapter here, inviting us to think about, are we making excuses? What are the excuses that I'm giving? And let's remember, these excuses can be for the others, right? The other person can even look at the excuse and say, well, that's a fair justification. The other person may not even see it as an excuse. The person may see it as a real justification. Or, no, you're totally justified of doing this or of not doing this. However, the question is not about the others. The question is about me. The question is about, is this really a justification? Is this really necessary to do or not to do? Or is it just one more excuse of not doing what we need to do? And then he's basically that's what he's going to talk about. And I'm just going to mention a few of these because we will fit in some of these categories, sometimes in all of them, maybe in a few, hopefully in none of them. He says, in the arena of spiritual assistance, you will someday see how many pretexts are invented by incarnates in order to escape the testimony of divine truth in tasks that are their personal responsibility. we have our responsibilities. Once we decided to reincarnate, or we were invited to come back here, we had the chance, hopefully, to choose what we needed to do. If we didn't have the chance to choose, we were forced, but we were not forced because somebody wanted. We were forced because it was necessary. So, just like a man or a mom or father forces, quote unquote, their child, their children to go to school, right? Hoping that one day they won't be able, or they won't need to force them to go to school anymore, because they will understand what it is, they will understand how necessary it is, and then they would simply keep going to school because they notice and they recognize how important that is. So once we come here, be it forced or by our choice, and having chosen what we need to do, sometimes, unfortunately, we create excuses, we invent pretexts so that we can say, oh no, I'm not going to do it now, I'm going to do it later. And then who is going to say no, right? We have the power, we have the free will to choose, and it's our choice. However, we all know, and that's one of the tenets, right, of what we always talk about in Spiritism. We can try to escape for a long time, but one day we won't be able to escape anymore, because we're trying to escape from who? From ourselves? We will not escape ourselves. So I can choose not to do it now, but one day I will have to do it. And how will I have to do it in the future? It's like I was mentioning, right? I can choose to go to school because I recognize that's important, or I can keep fighting and complaining all the time and making the experience of being in school a much worse experience than if I simply decided, well, now I'm going to take profit from being there. That's our choice. And that's what he's going to say, how contradictory we are most of the times. And then he says, the affluent stand guard over their wealth, and the poor, who have received the blessing of poverty, rebel against it. So if we are rich, we say, oh, I'm going to keep these riches for me, right? I'm not going to divide, I'm not going to use it for anything good. And if I'm poor, I rebel against it because I want to be rich. If I am young, I say, I am too young to do this. I need to enjoy my life. And when we are old, we say, well, now I'm old, I can't do anything else, so I'm not going to do it. Married couples complain about their families, and people who didn't marry complain that they don't have families and that they are always alone, or they have company at all times, but it's not that kind of really lasting and deep friendship or deep family. The ones who are sick, the infirm, say that they can't, and the healthy say that they don't need to do anything. So, in which of these are we? Right? Hopefully, we don't fit in any of these categories. Hopefully, if we are healthy, we are helping. And if we are infirm, we are also helping. If we are married, that I'm happy that I have a family. If I am still single and I couldn't find a match for myself, I'm glad that I'm single. I'm gonna keep looking, but I'm not gonna be desperate, and I'm gonna be making friends with a lot of people and making other people happy. If I am young, hopefully I woke up already and say, hey, I have my youth, I have so much strength, why don't I use part of this strength to help other people? And if I'm elderly, if I cannot walk, or if I cannot do something physical, why not record something, right? Why not give a talk? Why not teach somebody else, even if it's at a distance, right? If I'm rich, why don't I choose a charity, choose somebody, choose a place to help with my wealth? And if I'm poor, why not go and see if there isn't other people who are poorer than me, or to really understand that sometimes I just need to focus on what I need to do, and my work to get whatever I need to get to survive is what I need to learn from that experience. So we can choose how to live. We can choose what to do when we live. And that's the main thing of this chapter. Just as Alfredo said in the very, very beginning of the chapter, when he said that they enjoy a social life there too. We all need to enjoy social life. We are social beings. We need to have our social life. The question is always, do we know how to live? Or are we living just complaining, just being false, just not using what I have in my own hands? If I have a sickness, use that sickness to learn. If I am healthy, use the health that I have to spread the good news wherever I am. Spread happiness. If I am married, if I am not married, if I am young, if I am old, and just like Mr. Bassler says, right? I can't do a lot, but whatever I can do, let us do it, because that's what we need to do to transform this place that we live in a better place. And that's what we need to do to transform ourselves in a better person. Not in a better person than my neighbor, but to transform myself in a better person than I was a few minutes ago, a few days ago, a few years ago. Hopefully we can, and we are already seeing this transformation little by little as it is, but we are walking towards becoming more angel-like than becoming more animal-like. Let's use whatever we have in our social life to help transform this place in a better place. Mr. Bassler wanted to continue, but Alfredo came and says, hey, there's two young women coming, got him and Aniceto, and they want to solve a private problem, which we're going to talk about next week, hoping that you will join us again for chapter 29 of the Messages in Our Home, so that we can listen to interesting news. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.